So we're going to go ahead and get started again. We've got Ben Blakely here tonight, and he's going to talk to us about machine learning. He works at Dwala here in Des Moines. Thanks.
All right, I'm a pacer, so I will try to stay on camera here. So I'm the first talk in the new space, right? So I figured this awesome space is kind of like poetry corner feel. I figured I should write a haiku, okay? So the Des Moines Social Club, please don't hack the Wi-Fi net. I'd like to come back. There you go, there's my haiku. Is that a good icebreaker? There, thank you, I got some snaps, all right. I'll be here all night. Okay, cool, so what I'm actually here to talk to you about is not poetry, although we can do that later if you want. But is to talk about machine learning and what it is and what it's not. So real quick poll, how many of you are using machine learning in your jobs already? 1, 2, 2. All right, yes, I could say almost anything I want. You guys just don't correct me, all right? All right, how many of you have heard of machine learning? Right, or AI, I'll add AI into that bucket, right? Yeah, probably everybody. Okay, so there's a lot of information out there about what it is, how we can use it. There's a lot of uncertainty and concerns about AI right now. So I'm going to try to cover some of that with obviously a cyber focus. Please feel free to jump in with questions. I'll try to remember to repeat them into the mic so anyone on the stream can hear them as well. But otherwise, here we go. Okay, so as I'm sure all of you know, big data is a challenge for those of us in security. And so machine learning is driven by that in large part. So when I say big data, I'm talking about kind of 3 different things. I'm talking about the fact that we have a lot of data coming at us, volume, right? So those of you who are dealing with SIM systems or any sort of log correlation can probably testify to this, right? You're not talking about megabytes or probably even gigabytes of data. A lot of times you're talking about terabytes of data if you've got big collection operations. And not only is that data coming at us in big volumes, there's a lot of different data coming at us, right? Some of it is nicely structured JSON, SQL tables. Some of it is less nicely structured, but still we can deal with it, Apache common log statements, things like that. And then there's like the debug statements that got written in an app that no one ever thought anyone would look at, that you all of a sudden want to get value out of, and you've got to figure out how to make sense of those, right? And anything in between. You can even add to that, if I want to start looking at Twitter feeds, whatever, there's all sorts of data I might want to ingest. And in terms of velocity, what I'm talking about is if we're looking at this from an incident response perspective, I don't want to know in 90 days that someone hacked me right now. I don't want to even know in a week. I want to know right now, right? So it's not good enough for me to have alerts that can run using algorithms that take a lot of time to run because they need to happen very fast. So it's complex, it's big, we want to know very fast. Can anyone sympathize with that problem? Right? Yeah, okay. I see lots of nods. So when we talk about machine learning, let's kind of clear up that definition to start with. So yes, when we talk about machine learning, there's a lot of kind of biological inspirations behind this, okay? Especially when you start talking about artificial intelligence. There's a lot of overlap in the way we talk about it. So another quick poll, if I had to ask you who thinks that machine learning and AI go back prior to 1980? Really, no one? Okay, prior to 1990? Stacy, yes? Okay, we're going the wrong direction, actually. So the concept of cybernetics actually came out of World War II. Okay, this is like an early 50s, late 50s, mid 50s, somewhere in there concept. Of course, it was very different back then. Back then we're talking vacuum tubes, and the applications of it were not trying to detect intrusions into IT networks. Obviously, it was applications like if I have an anti-aircraft gun and I want this anti-aircraft gun to be able to track an airplane in the sky and lead it appropriately and take it out, how can I design a system that can recognize the pattern in that aircraft's flight and fire a bullet accurately, okay? So it goes back a long way, and there were a lot of neurological inspirations to that, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And that's mostly driven by the fact that during that time period into the 60s, 70s, both computer science and psychology and neurology were advancing very quickly, kind of in parallel in a lot of ways. A lot of people were interested in both. There's a lot of overlap in the research. So there's a lot of excitement about that and a lot of kind of hype, which is something I'm sure we're all familiar with. I'm sure there should have been a Gartner hype curve for cybernetics, right, in 1960 or something. But then it got really hard, okay? We just realized, really computers aren't brains. I'm using we in the profession sense, obviously here, right? Computers aren't brains. It doesn't necessarily work that way. So there was a long period, depending on how you define it, where, yeah, there was still research going on, but there just wasn't much energy behind it. Some really interesting work from that time would be like Marvin Minsky, who wrote the book Society of Mind, who, if you're at all interested in these topics, I highly suggest reading. And a lot of other people besides. But today we've gotten to the point where not only is the need bigger, like we talked about before, but now we finally have the computing power and the computer science theory to drive a lot of these ideas in ways that we didn't when this stuff first started to get exciting, originally. And so I like this analogy, though. I've adapted it / stolen it from somewhere, so you may have heard something similar. But, yeah, we use biology as an inspiration for machine learning. We use neurology as an inspiration. But if we still built airplanes like birds, we never would have gotten to jets and rockets, right? So at some point, biological inspiration only takes us so far. And that's really where we're at. So I know this is small for those of you in the room and maybe streaming, so don't worry about the details on here. But real quickly, I just want to talk about the difference between AI and machine learning, and a little bit about, when I say machine learning, what I'm talking about in terms of general categories. So AI and machine learning get used interchangeably a lot in the press, in even marketing materials, and by people that aren't in this area of research. But if you're researching these things, there's actually a pretty big difference. And this I stole from androidauthority.net, if you want to go grab it. I assume it's still live. So when I'm talking about machine learning, I'm talking about a pretty specific area, which is I want to use basically mathematical transformations to try to learn one pattern and then recognize that same pattern again. Okay? Machine learning is not going to find new patterns in most cases. It's going to recognize patterns that I can train it on. Okay? When we talk about artificial intelligence, this is really the really cool stuff, but the stuff that is still, depending on who you ask, 10 to 500 years off. An interesting book for that, Life 2.0 by Max Tegmark, talks about that and kind of the uncertainty in that timeline. But this is, sometimes we use the term general AI to make that distinction. And this is, if we want to talk about, I'm going to make a computer that's conscious, right? I'm going to make a computer that can think and solve problems, that can write code. Usually we're talking about that upper level of AI. That stuff is cool, but that is not where we're at today. And for those of us that want to apply this stuff, like in cybersecurity, that's a little bit outside of what we're interested in, right? When we talk about machine learning, though, typically we group that into 3 groups: supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning you don't see in use as much. That's actually the closest to the biological inspiration. So how many of you know Pavlov's dog? Yeah, probably a lot of you guys. A lot of us have science-y backgrounds, right? So Pavlov's dog, right? I ring the bell, feed him, ring the bell, feed him, ring the bell, feed him, and eventually I ring the bell and he salivates without food, okay? Just a quick refresher. I mean, that's reinforcement learning. And so applied to our context, okay, I might not necessarily know the exact features I'm looking for in my network, but let's use the attack detection example. Every time I detect an attack, I'm going to have some algorithm that increases the score based on whatever inputs I give it, right? And vice versa. And over time, I hope that it kind of just learns what's an attack on its own. Really cool, but like I said, probably the least used. Supervised learning and unsupervised learning, which you see the most. Supervised means I know what ground truth is. So in the attack example, that means I've got a training data set that consists of whatever I'm training on, if it's NetFlow data, PCAP data, firewall logs, whatever I'm training on. And for that data, for each saying NetFlow log, I know whether it's an attack or not with pretty much 100% certainty. Okay? So assuming I have that data, I can use that to train a model to recognize those same patterns in new data. Okay? Obviously, what a lot of you are probably thinking right now is, yeah, that's cute, but this is the real world. When do we ever know with 100% certainty what in my logs is an attack? And you're right. So there are places where supervised learning can be really useful, even in cybersecurity. But a lot of times, we're more interested in the unsupervised learning case. And I'm going to go through some examples of each of these, trying not to get too much down into the weeds, just in the interest of time. But unsupervised learning means I don't necessarily know the ground truth. These are algorithms where I'm going to throw a set of data at it, and it's going to try to do some sort of intelligent, you would say, transformation on it. So clustering is an example of this. I want to throw, let's again use that NetFlow example, my NetFlow logs of my algorithm, and have it use the attributes of those NetFlow entries to try to group the entries into different groups. And maybe I'll get lucky, and those groups will end up being attack and not attack. Let me just tell you that's probably not what will happen. But it gives me some way to kind of start splitting things up and then doing some follow-up analysis on it. So it doesn't tell me this group is attack data, but it does tell me this group of data looks different from this group of data. Okay? So you're already starting to see there's a lot of nuance and overlap and complexity to how we apply these different things. I'm not going to go through this slide in a lot of detail either, but essentially when we're doing machine learning, the basic process is that, in the case of supervised learning anyway, we need to train it and we need to run it. But when we're training it, there are a lot of things we have to be careful of. Okay? And again, assuming that we can get a training data set that's reliable and we care about, a lot of times the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get that data into some sort of format that my algorithm can consume. Okay? So if I've got syslog data or even NetFlow data, that's not really something I can do math on, right? I can't do math on an Apache error log. That's not really going to work. So there are things in terms of extraction or transformations that we might need to do. Might even need to do some cleaning, throw out messages that are either irrelevant or corrupt. They're going to throw off my training. And then the last concept there is dimensionality reduction. And so a lot of you are probably familiar with the concept, the curse of dimensionality, right, from a programming perspective, meaning that the more complex my data is, so in the case of an array, the more dimensions my array has, the more computing power it's going to take for me to analyze or do anything on that data in bulk. So that's the same thing in machine learning. And the more complex data we want to train on, the more horsepower we're going to need to do it. So dimensionality reduction means using various techniques. Say I've got 16 features of my NetFlow data. Well, maybe there's a lot of redundancy in those 16 features, and I can crunch that down into 3 kind of made-up features that really represent all of my data, and now I can process it a lot more effectively. So that all happens before you really do anything machine learning related, right? That's really just kind of setting the stage for machine learning. When I'm actually training it, it's also important that I keep some of that training data aside to make sure that I can measure the accuracy of my machine learning model. So if I took all of my training data and trained my machine learning model on it, well, then I've got a problem, because either I have to get new data and I have to figure out what the ground truth is for that new data in order to determine how well my machine learning model is performing, or I have to use some of the data that I've already trained it with to test it, which is cheating, right? So what we do is we typically save some portion, say 20% of our data as we're training it, to kind of keep that in reserve, randomly sample it out, so that we can use that to test it. Because machine learning is a very iterative process. Both from the perspective of the algorithms themselves, there's a lot of iteration, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And also from the perspective of, this is the dirty little secret about machine learning, and there's actually an XKCD comic about this later. But machine learning is kind of just about throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, all right? And sometimes we can be smart about which stuff we throw and at which wall, but we're still throwing stuff at a wall. And that really is where machine learning is today. Okay. But anyway, so I'm going to train it. I'm going to run it run that trained model in production. And model is kind of one of those key words. Model just means whatever representation I have of the learning that my algorithm did. All right. Okay. So getting a little bit mathy for just a second. So how many of you know what a linear regression is? Like, remember that from high school, college? A few hands. Thank you, Michelle. The professor remembers. Thank you, Michelle. All right. So yeah, linear regression, for those of you who don't remember algebra in high school, that's fine, right? If you look over here, I know it's small, but this is, okay, let's say we're in Excel. I've got a bunch of points in a scatter plot, and I want to draw that line to show me the trend in my scatter plot, right? That's a linear regression. So how many of you have ever done that? Okay, some of you, yeah. So if you've done that, congratulations, you've done machine learning, right? You can do machine learning in Excel. You can even do machine learning on a TI-89 or on paper with a small enough data set, right? All we're doing there is we're minimizing error. And minimizing error is the core of machine learning, okay? So there's all of these algorithms out there. There's all of these different ways to optimize them and run them and ways to transform the data set. But at the middle of all of that is this concept that we're going to just do iterations to just try to minimize our error as intelligently as we can, to do as fast as we can. So in that linear regression example, we've got our points. We're just going to figure out where we can draw a line to minimize the space between all of those points on that line. And that is our regression line. If we do this in multiple dimensions, I'm not going to go into details on that, but that is essentially just the same thing in multiple dimensions. This concept of stochastic gradient descent, so stochastic means random, gradient means a hill, descent means going down, right? Thank you, academia. Stochastic gradient descent is just this concept that we're going to try to move down our slope in the way that gets us to the smallest error possible at the fastest rate possible. Okay, so that's just kind of a cool three-dimensional illustration of the same concept. But there's this problem, okay? And those of you that follow XKCD have probably seen this. So for those of you who have done the linear regression in Excel, you've probably had that moment of, well, yeah, I can do the linear regression, but man, that polynomial regression seems to match my data better. Or what if I do like a seventh power regression? Man, that like perfectly matches my data, right? But then we have a problem too, because what you've done there is you've overfitted your data. And just like in Excel, if this is my data set, all of these are the same points, right? And all of these red lines are different. I'm not sure they're all legitimate functions, but they're all different ways you could draw a line to minimize error, okay? And so if you could either do the linear regression over there, that's just a straight line, or this crazy thing here that exactly matches every point, yeah, this works better on my training data set, if I can call this a training data set. But if I had a new point to plug in here, this probably isn't going to work very well because it's overfitted. It's fitting my data too tightly. So we have that same problem in machine learning. And that is, we have methods to deal with that in terms of just adding randomness to our training process, kind of handicapping parts of the training process in terms of hiding some data from it at random points or things like that. But it's something we have to be aware of. So I'm going to just talk about a few examples of algorithms that are pretty common. And I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here. We can talk more later if you want to get into more detail. The first one is kind of a cool one because it's pretty easy to understand visually. It's called a support vector machine. This is a supervised method. Okay, so over there on the left, for those of you who can see it, it kind of just looks like a linear regression, right? I've got my red points and my blue points. Sorry if you're colorblind, I just realized that. But I've got my red points and my blue points, and I've got a line right between them, okay? And just like in a linear regression, my goal there is to minimize the error. But here, I'm not trying to just draw a line that minimizes error to my points. I'm trying to draw a line that gives me as much space as possible between the two different sets of points. Okay? So subtly different. So that works in 2 dimensions, and it turns out it doesn't have to be a straight line. I can do this with lots of a much higher dimension function. So you see, in the literature, you see these types of graphs, the middle one, used quite a bit in medical literature. So if you're trying to diagnose a disease, for example, a lot of times, whatever your variables are, there's not a clean linear separation, but to some extent, they may be able to find groups like this. And it works in higher dimensions as well. So machine learning, we're not usually just dealing with 2-dimensional data. It's the same thing in multiple dimensions. So from a cyber perspective, the why we care about this here tonight perspective, I know these are tiny, so I'm just going to talk through them. So over on the left, this is a 3D scatter plot of a data set I made up that's pseudo-realistic, showing different types of network traffic. Destination port is vertical. Bytes is this axis, and duration of the connection is the other axis that way, okay? So like I said, somewhat realistic, but I made it up. So let's say I wanted to detect BitTorrent traffic, okay? I'm sure a lot of you have been there. And assuming that the BitTorrent users aren't doing anything too crazy, but maybe they're encrypting it so I can just inspect it. Let's just assume we had no other way to detect this. Okay, well, it's pretty easy for me in this view to see if BitTorrent traffic are these tealish, greenish points up here. Yeah, I could pretty easily draw a line in to separate those. Okay, cool. So why do I need machine learning? I could probably do that via simpler methods. Okay, but what if I want to pick out, I'm going to look at my screen here, sorry. What if I want to pick out the SSH, which are these, up on the screen, it looks this dark purple color points. Well, down here, we can't even really pick them apart. Everything's lumped together. But a state vector machine is able to draw a representation of that data, and what's on the right is an actual state vector machine output from that data set in R, where it's able to represent that data in a way that, okay, now I can kind of draw a region that contains just my SSH points where I wasn't able to do that before, okay? Now, I should say, usually, this is just for illustration purposes. Usually, I, as a human, would not probably be looking at this output. Okay? Even this is just a slice of the output because it's a multidimensional output. But this gives you an idea of how that method works. And from an automated perspective, you can train algorithms then to figure out that region and pick out, in this case, the SSH points. Okay? Okay, neural networks. How many people have heard of neural networks? Yeah, quite a few of you. So, and actually, I skipped over earlier, I had the Johnny Depp Transcendence movie, which a lot of you have probably seen. So neural networks get a lot of press. Transcendence, if you haven't seen it and you're interested in this, it's worth watching, because the whole premise there, okay, spoiler alert, all right, is that Johnny Depp is a computer scientist. He writes an algorithm to basically emulate himself. He dies, and then his algorithm ends up taking over the world. Okay, cool, classic Hollywood. Yeah, so neural networks get a lot of play because it's an easy thing based on the name for Hollywood to get a hold of, the media to get a hold of, and it is inspired by neurology at the most basic level. So if we're talking about a neuron in the brain, a neuron is composed of a dendrite and the neuron itself and a dendrite that connects it to the surrounding neurons, okay? Basically, if you look at this picture here on the left, you could think of the circles as neurons and the lines as dendrites. Okay, so far so good. But in the brain, it's really just based on activation and activation levels. We're still pretty good because the way this works is we're going to train each of these circles, each of these nodes, to give it optimal values for the weights and biases when it passes values forward, to only activate in whatever combination gives me the output I want. Okay, so that was all like probably Greek, I understand. But essentially what it means is if my inputs here are, again, let's go back to our NetFlow example. If I've got 4 different input features, say source port, destination port, duration, bytes, I think were the ones I used before, and my output layer is 0, it was an attack, 1, it was an attack, and anything in between I'm not sure, but I have some level of confidence. Okay, well I'm going to throw all that input at this neural network. The basically matrix math or linear algebra that happens in the middle is just going to try random numbers, all right, over and over and over again in a somewhat intelligent way to try to figure out how to make that output as often as possible match what I think the inputs are. Okay, so when I give it a attack data set, make that output show a 1. When I give it a non-attack data set, make that output show a 0. Okay, so this is the point where it's just a lot of horsepower. Interesting is, because this is just linear algebra, we see similar math in other places, notably Bitcoin mining and graphics processing. Okay? So if you're trying to write a video game engine that has to calculate the lighting for this room and figure out, okay, if that light there is sending out photons, light rays, to every surface in this room, and how are they bouncing off all of these surfaces, you basically need to do the same operation to a lot of data at once. That's what GPUs are written for. Okay, it turns out that's exactly what we're doing here. We're doing the same operation to a bunch of data all at once. So machine learning is actually driven, along with Bitcoin mining, has actually driven a lot of the growth in the GPU industry because they're so good at doing this type of math. So for example, do any of you own a Tesla? No Tesla owners? Okay. Okay. Well, so Teslas actually have a GPU under the hood. And we actually heard just before in the news how Teslas have had some problems with their AI in terms of image recognition, but they have the GPU under the hood to do the machine learning that goes with image recognition tasks. So it's just really expanded that market, which is kind of an aside, but it's super interesting. Okay? There are lots of different types of neural networks. So first of all, this is just a simple, we call this a one layer, because there's this one trained layer in the middle. So we can have what are called deep neural networks that are multiple layers, right? How many nodes we have in this layer is another variable we can change. There are different types of nodes we can have, different ways we can connect them. We can feed back, we can feed forward, we can skip, all sorts of variations on this. And that's why neural networks in and of themselves are a whole area of research. The difficult thing about this is it's super opaque, meaning once I have a trained model, like, okay, yeah, this seems to perform pretty well, right? Like my data shows me my error rates have gotten good, but why does it think that this is a puppy and this is a kitty? I don't really know. I just know that the error rate is low, right? I don't know what about my image it thinks, yes, puppy, and what makes it think, yes, kitty. I don't know. I just know that the error rate is low, right? And we'll come back to that because that's actually a really important point. Okay, I'm going to skip decision trees just because I tend to be long-winded anyway. But quick version is this is a really cool technique that doesn't get used very much. That basically tries to take what we know. It's kind of an expert system. It takes what we know about a problem space and automatically learn kind of a flow chart for making the decision about what an object might be. So yeah, if you're interested in that, talk to me later. Bayesian networks are a really cool one. I'm going to kind of mix two metaphors here because there's one that I'm sure we're all familiar with, which is spam. Who gets spam? Okay, so none of you are listening. All right. There's no one in this room that doesn't get spam. I know that's true. Okay, so I'm going to mix that metaphor a little bit. This is a digit recognition task, which is using the same type of math. So Bayesian learning is another supervised method. So if I'm talking about the case where I'm trying to label spam messages spam and not spam messages ham, right? If you don't know, that's spam and ham is what we cool IT people call them. Well, as you can probably guess, there are certain words that are more likely to appear in spam, right? Any volunteers with some examples? No, that's fine. So there are some words that are more likely in spam, and there are some words that are probably more likely in not spam, in ham. But those aren't completely reliable, right? Like, what if you're a pharmaceutical company that sells a certain drug? Okay, well, your emails probably aren't spam just because they say a certain word, right? What if you're in the adult entertainment industry, right? So, it's not necessarily 100% reliable. But what Bayesian learning can do is say, all right, I've got this email or this set of emails that I know what's spam and what isn't. I can look at all of those emails and count what words appear in every email and whether it was spam or not, and start to develop some sense of the probability that given that a certain word is in a message, that message is spam. And for all of the words in the email, I can combine those and get a sense of the overall probability. Okay? And that turns out to work pretty well. I mean, there's other more advanced AI that has been applied to spam detection on top of that. But even that has been around for, 30 years probably, and it's been fairly reliable. To make it a little more visual and a little bit easier to understand, I really like this example of digit recognition. So if I've got a bunch of checks I'm trying to read in and automatically store in a database, I've got to be able to recognize these digits. Okay? So if I give it a set of 5s and a set of 6s, and I want it to learn the difference between the 5s and the 6s, what these pictures are showing you, the dark red pixels are the pixels that it's learned are very unlikely to be darker if this image is a 5. The brighter colors, the bright blues, are the ones that it's learned are more likely to be dark colored if it's a 5 or a 6, respectively, right? So you can see there's some different patterns there, and it's not clear cut. These aren't patterns that a human might pick out. But if you kind of add all of those values up, then you can figure out the probability that that's a 5 and that's a 6 based on that learning. Okay? So it's the same thing in the case of spam, just not in a visual way. And this gets applied to a lot of other places as well, including medicine. But this is where we're probably most familiar with it. Okay, I mentioned clustering earlier, and this is one that's probably most useful to us since we so rarely know ground truth in our data. And clustering, like neural networks, is a research area, and there are lots of different types of clustering algorithms. Some of them are actually supervised. I'm just going to talk about the unsupervised ones here. So like I said earlier, my goal is to just split my data up into clusters that tend to look the same and maximize the distance between those clusters. So one algorithm, for example, called k-means, I'm going to have to tell it, I think there are 3 different types of data in my data set. Try to label my data with 3 different labels to give me those optimal groupings of data points. Okay. And other than that, I mostly talked about this earlier, but so to take another example, which again I know you can't read, and that's cool. So this is another hypothetical data set I made up. Say you've got audit logs, right? And so in those audit logs, you're able to figure out which department an employee is in your audit logs. And you're able to figure out if the action was write, read, or change permissions on that data, okay? Super contrived, but we're learning, so we'll go with it, all right. Okay, so on the left is my ground truth. This is the data set I made. It's colored by which department they're in, and the axes are how many of each of those types of events. Okay, so for example, the pink, which is on the back bottom, that was the one that I had called IT. So it has a lot of change permissions events, not very many write, and a lot of read, if I'm interpreting my graph correctly, right? Okay, so whether that's realistic or not, whatever, just ignore that. But okay, and likewise for the other groups. So when I feed this to a clustering algorithm, cheating, knowing that there are 7 classes in there because I made the data set, this is the output I get. Again, from R, which is a statistical tool, free if you want to play with it. So you can see, okay, like it picked out those pink ones, those IT points. It got those pretty reliably. And these two top groups, which I don't remember what I called those, accounting and legal, I think is what I called those. Right? This is in the world of Ben. Right? So up here it did pretty well, right? But then when it got down here where things started to get kind of mixed together, obviously it fell apart, right? Because given this data, how could it possibly know the difference? Because they're all in the same space, right? Likewise with this grouping over here, it's blue and got split. Okay, so clustering isn't perfect, right? And it's only as good as the data you give it, but it's usually pretty fast, especially if it's not super complex data. And sometimes it's the only choice we have. Okay, so don't worry about reading and memorizing this. But the point is, like I said earlier, there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of complexity. How do I know which algorithm I should use? It has a lot to do with the data you have. This is a cool graph. The URL is it's peekaboo-vision.blogspot.com, where I grabbed that if you want to look at it. So it has to do a lot with the type of data, whether it's labeled or not, how much data you have. And that'll kind of drive you towards different algorithms that you can use. So the ones we talked about tonight, this would be a neural network, stochastic gradient descent regressor neural network. There's naive Bayes over there. Clustering is here. This whole group is clustering. And these are all the dimensionality reduction things I talked about. So each one of those is its own area to go into. And it has a little bit to do with your data and a lot to do with experimentation. So like I said, your predictions are only going to be as good as your data, right? So because your eyes probably skipped to this anyway. Let's just jump to that point. So how many of you are familiar with the Microsoft Tay debacle? Yeah, I see some nods. Some people are afraid to nod. Okay, that's fine. I'm not going to call on you for quotes. Don't worry. Okay, so if there's anyone here from Microsoft or that was at Microsoft, let me preface this by saying I'm not picking on Microsoft, because this is one of those, there but for the grace of God go we type things. All right. I mean, this could have happened. I mean, maybe they should have known better, but still, I get it. So if you're not familiar with what happened here, Microsoft, a team at Microsoft, decided to write a Twitter bot that used machine learning where it was going to respond to direct messages, learn from those direct messages, and then tailor its responses based on the tweets that were directed at it. Yeah, okay, so you get it, right? I mean, what could go wrong, right? To which I say, have you been on the internet? So this, we're going to build a wall and Mexico is going to pay for it. That was by far one of the milder tweets. Okay, I've given this talk a few times, and before I gave it the first time, I had a different quote here, and my wife is like my censor, right? So I was like, yeah, these are my slides. What do you think? And she's like, no. Like, okay, what about this one? No. So this is probably like the sixth one I came up with. The point is, it says some terrible things, racist, sexist, just terrible things. And of course got turned off, right? Very embarrassing for Microsoft. So why did that happen, right? Okay, so yes, internet people, but other than internet people, why did that happen? Well, it was a bad training data set, right? And your machine learning algorithm is not magic. It's only as good as the algorithm you use and how you configure that algorithm and the data you use to train it, okay? So if your data, if you don't have enough data, if I'm trying to train a model to tell the difference between an attack and not attack and NetFlow data, and I give it 9 examples of not attacks and 1 example of attacks, is that going to be reliable? No, obviously not, right? On the other hand, if I give it a ton of data, it's going to be impossible to do, so you got to find something in the middle, right? Also, is my data representative? Even if I give it a ton of data, if that data is not similar to what real life looks like, this is like when you do a survey, right? This is the example of, I don't remember which company it was, using the Yellow Pages to do a survey like back in the 50s and then found out it was biased because only certain people had yellow books, right? It's that type of thing, right? Is your data representative of the truth? Because if not, it's biased, and it may be biased in other ways, like coming from internet people. So yeah, if you've got a strong stomach and you're interested, go look for some of the other quotes because it's good reading. Okay, so I was alluding to this earlier, and this is our that XKCD graphic I was reading, or comic I was referring to earlier. If you can't read it, that's fine, go look it up. I'm not going to read the comic because that's kind of lame. But it turns out, even at an academic level, our understanding of machine learning and a lot of these algorithms is pretty bad. So we know how to make algorithms that seem to perform well. We know how to, in a lot of cases, make them perform faster, but we don't do a good job of understanding why they give us the answers that they give us, okay? We don't understand, if I give it different inputs, how I can't really, in most cases, predict the way that's going to affect my output in a reliable way. So I can't really do formal testing. And as I said earlier, once I've got these trained weights, what do those weights even mean? Okay. And in a lot of cases, if this is in an automobile, an airplane, a nuclear power plant, you're going to have to be able to formally verify that it's going to perform where you think it is. And right now, we really can't do that. There's some interesting research in terms of limiting the scope or the space that input data can come from to help you give some guarantees in that within like the last year. But still we've got a lot of work to do there from a research perspective. And by the way, let me see. Yeah, okay, hold on. I'm going to say one more thing here because one of the slides I dropped is super important. So there are a lot of ethical considerations here, right? So, and some of you may have seen this in the news. The most recent one that I can remember, other than the Tesla case, which wasn't an ethical case, it was just a safety case. But the most recent one that I can remember was the case where AWS was using a machine learning model. It was either for recruitment or promotion, something like that. Does anyone remember for sure? It was one of those. It was an HR process anyway. And they found out that their machine learning model that was trained on, probably historical data, had a gender bias. Okay? Well, crap, right? Like they probably didn't mean to do that, I would think, right? And they probably had no idea they was going to do that before they rolled it out into production. But they'd already been using this thing for some time before they found this out and had to roll it back. Okay? So that's kind of scary. I don't actually know if there are any cases that it's still happening, but one example that used to get used quite a bit was there were companies that were making machine learning systems to be used for parole decisions. Okay, so you talk about a historical data set with problems, okay? Like that's one of them, right? So, I mean, it just gets into really, really shady places where if we don't understand, if we have these problems, should we be using machine learning? Is that a responsible thing to be doing? From the security perspective, yes, we care about that, but we also care about a lot of these other aspects. I'm going to write this machine learning algorithm. How do I protect that intellectual property? How do I make sure that someone who gets a hold of the output, the trained model, can't deduce the inputs I fed it? Because what if I'm training that on an HR database? What if I'm training that on healthcare data, right? So we have to make sure we can preserve the privacy of the data that's been trained on. Not to mention issues like the Tesla issue. If I can stick a Post-it note on a stop sign and make the car think the stop sign says 45 miles an hour, that's a security problem and a safety problem, right? I mean, it's probably a little bit of both. So, not to be a total wet blanket on machine learning, but these are the types of problems that are currently kind of at the forefront in terms of research, and the things that if you're going to implement it or buy a solution that implements it, you need to be aware of. So PS, attackers can use machine learning too, right? It turns out attackers can also access the internet, okay? They can also get on GitHub, right? So these are a few examples, and I don't know if we can like post these slides or something, but I'll try to get these slides out for anybody that wants them so you can get these links later. I'm not going to go into these in detail, but essentially, we can, at least in a lab environment right now, we can have machine learning algorithms that can conduct limited pen tests, that can find and fix vulnerabilities in code, again, in a lab environment, but still. Can break CAPTCHAs, which I have a real beef with CAPTCHAs, but that's a whole separate story, right? And yeah, and actually Mayhem was the source code one. So that actually won the DARPA Grand Challenge by competing against another machine learning bot, attacking each other, actually found a vulnerability in its opponent, patched that vulnerability in itself, and then used that vulnerability to take out its opponent, right? Fully automated. This was not a commercial operating system or commercial programming language, but still. So, if nothing else, we need to be aware that it's going to be coming at us in other ways. Okay, so that's really it for the slides. I'm happy to take questions. I have some resources on here. This bottom link, which I know is kind of cut off thanks to my computer. And again, I'll try to get these slides out to you guys. But that bottom link, which I have the Google link there for, is a talk by James Mickens from Harvard that actually talks a lot more and a lot less, or a lot more candidly about the Tay example and a lot of the ethical concerns. So that one in particular is of interest. Deeplearningbook.org is a free online book written by Ian Goodfellow, who's now at Google DeepMind, and goes into a lot of these details. And the top link, orellum.org/Society of Mind, is that Marvin Minsky book from the 80s, which is really a classic. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm happy to take questions or let Stacy talk, or Nicole talk, either one. Yeah.
So, our firm does we pen testing cyber stuff. We actually did an application
Right.
how do you reduce the amount of time and increase the accuracy of the training as you apply machine learning to the real world?
Right. So on the stream, essentially the question is, there's a lot of context dependency in terms of your training, right? So how do you deal with that? And what are some of the thoughts around that? So from a research perspective, there's this concept of transfer learning. So can I train a model in one environment and then pick that model up, drop it in another environment, and have it work? Okay. Obviously, that depends on what we're talking about, right? That was a research interest of mine that I didn't make much traction on because it's just a really hard problem to answer from a cyber perspective. The reason is because getting your hands on realistic cyber data sets that are both large enough and representative enough to be meaningful, but also that companies will let out of their walls is extremely, extremely difficult. So that's a hard question to answer. But in general, my answer would be, I'm sure a lot of us in this room have tuned IDSs, right, and similar things like that. And we know that false positives are a problem. Okay, so yes, machine learning can often recognize patterns in data that humans wouldn't necessarily be able to recognize by themselves. But if there's no pattern there, it doesn't matter if it's a human or a machine looking at it, it's not going to recognize the pattern, right? And if you train a model in an environment that's very, very different, no, it's not going to perform well. So I think there are, I'm kind of a cynic when it comes to this stuff, but I think there are a lot of products out there that do offer kind of a drop-in machine learning experience, and I think that is extremely optimistic. So you should be cautious about that. My personal opinion. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So I've actually been working with a group of students at Towson University. So the question was if I've been following GANs. So a GAN is called a generative adversarial network, and the term adversarial in the name does not mean it's adversarial in the sense that we cyber people would usually think about it. It's adversarial in the sense that I'm going to build a neural network that basically has two components. And a lot of times we use the example of wine as an analogy to help explain this. So if I wanted to build a machine learning algorithm that could taste wine and could tell the difference between red wine and white wine, I might train it to a certain level, but then I hit a wall. I just can't get it to get any better. So I can add another component into that topology whose job is to try to basically forge what red wine looks like and trick my discriminator, the other part, into getting a wrong answer. Okay? And it gets to cheat. It gets to kind of basically use my discriminator to train itself to try to generate that output. And those two go back and forth until either the generator can't win anymore or the discriminator kind of maxes out, kind of plateaus. So from a cyber perspective, there's not a lot of research into this. The research that I'm doing with the guys at Towson is to answer the question, can we use a GAN to generate, for example, NetFlow? I think they're actually using the KDD99, which is a slightly different data set, but network-like data sets to try and ramp up the learning when I've got a limited amount of data to begin with. Okay? Specifically, a lot of times the problem we have, not only in terms of getting the data and it being the right size, when we're talking about representativeness, in a real network, my data set, if I'm most networks, right, is going to be mostly non-attack data. And for a lot of machine learning training algorithms, having an imbalance in terms of your training data is a problem because your machine learning algorithm will become really sensitive to certain things and really not sensitive to other things versus if I had a 50-50 attack, not attack split. So we're trying to use GANs to see if we can ramp up, take our small amount, if we've got a data set that's got 99% non-attack and 1% attack data, can we use a GAN to take that small amount of attack data and amplify it so that it is a similar volume to the non-attack data, and then feed that back and train it? So, by no means am I or is that group the only people thinking about this, but GANs have typically been used for things like image recognition, audio recognition, and other domains, and there's not much application to cyber yet. So I'd say that's still a pretty open field for research. Yeah, great question. Okay, yeah, one more.
What's the coolest problem you've seen solved by machine learning?
Oh, the coolest problem I've seen solved by machine learning that I can talk about? I don't know, that's a tough one. Yeah, so that student project, actually, I wasn't sure if it was going to work, and it is. So that was really cool. But in terms of like a real world example, I don't really have a good one that I can share. That's why I made these hypothetical data sets, right? I mean, this is the problem in machine learning research from a cyber perspective, is that nobody wants to share their data for understandable reasons, right? I guess I'll go with Tay as my favorite machine learning example. Yeah, good question. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for that, though. Okay, so on that terrible answer, I will turn it over either to Stacy or Nicole. All right, thank you, everyone.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a break until 7:30, and then we'll have Nicole come up. Thanks.